Through the 19th and 20th centuries, millions of people have come to the world's fairs to explore the nations of the world. It is at these large-scale exhibitions that dozens of countries gather in one city to show off the newest and greatest elements of their culture. The World's Fairs provided a platform for nations from across the globe to encounter one another and exchange goods, culture, and ideas. The concept of an international exhibition began in London in 1851. This first World's Fair was held in a single building called the Crystal Palace. Titled The Great Exhibition, it was organized by Prince Albert and opened by Queen Victoria. The British hosted this expo as a way to show off their achievements and make new trade connections. The exhibits were divided up into 4 sections: raw materials, machinery, manufactures, and the fine arts. Many exhibits focused on the advances made during the Industrial Revolution. Though the exhibition emphasized British trade and industry, there were many foreign exhibits. This allowed countries to exchange goods and culture with one another. Even though this was a great international exchange, other nations felt that there was too much emphasis on the British Empire. Following the success of the London exhibition, many countries held similar events. The next major expo was in Paris in 1855. However, Emperor Napoleon III ignored the London exhibition and claimed that the concept for the World's Fairs originated in France. Another large-scale exhibition was held in Vienna in 1873. The Austrian Empire proudly showed off its achievements, hoping it would be seen as a future world power. Therefore, at least in part, the fair was used as a tool for political leverage. The 1876 Philadelphia Fair celebrated the centennial of the United States. By this time, the fairs had grown to be so large that they could not be contained in just one building. As a result, the Philadelphia Fair was made up of several pavilions spread across the fairgrounds. One of the highlights was the arm of the then unfinished Statue of Liberty, which was also on display at another Paris fair 2 years later. Near the turn of the 20th century, the fairs grew both in size and grandeur. In 1889, Paris held an expo to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution. It was here that the Eiffel Tower was constructed, as a monument to this turning point in French history. This use of the fairs to celebrate historical events was common at the time. Other such fairs included the 1893 Chicago Fair, which celebrated the 400th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of America, and the 1904 St. Louis Fair, which celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Louisiana Purchase. The fairs of this period were often labeled the greatest fair in history, claiming to be bigger and better than the last. It was common at these and earlier exhibitions for visitors to encounter new inventions that would soon become part of daily life. The fairs became a popular place for new technology premieres. Among the products that made their debut at the World's Fairs were the lawnmower, the voting machine, the Singer sewing machine, the Bell telephone, and the Remington typewriter. The international exhibitions also provided one of the only places that Americans and Europeans could explore non-Western cultures. While these nations did have their own exhibits, it was common for the fair organizers to set up replicas of foreign villages. Civilizations replicated included Indonesia and the Philippines. However, those living in these villages rarely got fair treatment. This included poor living conditions, such as poor quality food and water. A group of Inuit at the Chicago Fair acknowledged this and proceeded to sue the organizers and set up their own exhibit outside of the fairgrounds. In addition to these cultural exhibits, other displays, especially those at the Chicago Fair, allowed visitors to encounter natural history specimens. All of these displays reached a wide audience, since the fairs had a considerable amount of influence near the turn of the century. Tens of millions of people visited the exhibitions to get as close as they would ever get in many cases to encountering foreign cultures. The press, on the local, national, and international level, also gave the fairs much attention. Many countries saw the fairs as an excellent opportunity to show off their culture and achievements. 60 countries participated in the St. Louis Fair alone. The Eiffel Tower was reused as the centerpiece for the 1900 Paris Fair. This exhibition was one of the most popular yet. It attracted nearly 51 million visitors at a time when the French population was only 41 million. As was typical of the expos of this period, electricity, and electric lighting in particular, was a focal point. Though this new technology was emphasized, the exhibits also looked back on the progress made in the 19th century. A year later, the Pan American Exhibition was held in Buffalo, New York, which fell short of high expectations. However, the Pan American Expo is only a significant historic event because it was the assassination site of President William McKinley, and therefore the inauguration site of his vice president, Theodore Roosevelt. By the 1930s, fairs no longer looked back on progress made in the past, but looked optimistically to the future. This exploration of a utopian future was a reaction to the challenges of the Great Depression. The most significant fair of the decade was the 1939 New York Fair. The theme, The World of Tomorrow, embraced social and technological optimism. The exhibits showed visions of a utopian future made prosperous by democracy. This is well illustrated by the architectural icon of the fair, the Trilon and Perisphere. The very popular exhibits inside showed bright visions of a future city, which was a notable contrast to the dark, dirty cities of the time. Though the expo did reopen in 1940, World War II had broken out, and many countries withdrew their exhibits from the fair. Following World War II, fairs still focused on innovation, but not in a utopian light. This could be seen in the icon of the Brussels 58 fair, called Atomium. These fairs also placed emphasis on science and international peace. The 1962 Seattle World's Fair had a strong emphasis on the accomplishments of American scientists. This was showcased in the very popular United States Science exhibit. Here, visitors could learn about recent accomplishments and discoveries made by scientists. It was also for this fair that the iconic Seattle Space Needle was constructed. Though the 1964 New York Fair is important to the history of the city, it was largely unsuccessful. This was partly due to the fact that many of the exhibits were sponsored by corporations, giving a more commercial nature to the fair. This, along with a lackluster design, contributed to falling considerably short of the organizers' claim of it being the greatest event in history. A few years later, Canada held Expo 67 in Montreal, one of the country's most successful fairs. This fair was one of the most popular of the time, with over 15 million more visitors than the organizers had expected. It was one of the final fairs to be both financially successful and receive acclaim from the press. The final World's Fair to have significant influence was Osaka in 1970. This was the first major fair in Asia, though Japan had planned then cancelled 2 fairs prior. After Osaka 1970, fairs began to lose popularity, influence, and money. This was due to lackluster design and to changes in global society, such as a greater reliance on media. Ever since the Great Exhibition in 1851, nations have come to the world's fairs to explore and encounter one another. This helped give Western nations a more globalized view of the world. Another aspect of the exhibitions that helped feed globalization was the visitors' encounter with non-Western cultures. For many Americans and Europeans, the exhibitions offered the only place where faraway locations like Asia could be experienced closely. In addition to this, the fairs provided a way for nations to get international attention for their achievements. Especially in the 19th century, holding an expo could show that a nation was powerful and prosperous. The fairs also provided a place where countries could exchange ideas and culture. In addition to this cultural and societal impact, the exhibitions also allowed visitors to explore innovation and science. Even since the first fair, manufacturers saw these events as opportunities to let consumers encounter new products and innovations. The world's fairs allowed the nations of the world to encounter each other in one place.